Good morning. I'd like to call the Finance, Ways and Means Committee to order for January 20th, 2023. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Representatives Barrett, Boyd, Campbell, Camper, Cochran, Crawford, Faison, Freeman, Gant, Garrett, Hawk, Hicks, Kiesling, Lamberth, Love, Lynn, McKenzie, Miller, Moon, Parkinson, Shaw, Sparks, Whitson, Williams, Zachary, Vice Chairman Baum, Chair Lady Hazelwood. Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Before we get underway, are there any personal orders or announcements this morning? All right, seeing none, we have 5 budget hearings scheduled this morning. We're going to begin in just shortly, but after our budget hearings, we will have a budget overview by the TWRA, and that's regarding their oversight of Lake Halford. For those of you who are following along on Dashboard, there is no documentation for that because it's not a budget hearing. It's simply a presentation from TWRA on their progress and the oversight, the work that's being done there at the lake. So other than that, members, all of the presentation documents should be on your dashboard for your reference. And again, because of the good work from the Speaker's office and a lot of people in IT, folks at home are able now to access that dashboard as well and follow along. So with that, we are welcoming our financial institutions as our first presenter this morning. I'm having trouble seeing you there. Have to bounce around behind Representative Miller's head, but welcome. And if you would just introduce yourself and your companion there, and we'll ask you to just go ahead with your presentation and be prepared for all the questions that I know are going to follow.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. Greg Gonzalez, Commissioner, Department of Financial Institutions. And with me today is Michelle Berry, our Assistant Commissioner and Chief Operating Officer. And also in the room with us is Todd Staley, Assistant General Counsel, Legislative Liaison, as well as Ronnie Rogers Certain, who supports us in the HR area, is our liaison to the Department of Human Resources. Our budget request is for $32.4 million, 160 positions. This is a recurring base budget, no cost increases. If I could, let me provide just some brief background information with regard to our goals and the issues that we're working on. As you know, our mission is to provide a safe and sound banking system, but do it in a way that gives banks and other institutions the ability to support economic progress. We simply call that regulatory balance. And the way we do it is to tailor our regulation to the merits of each institution so we don't impose a one-size-fits-all approach. As a reminder, our department regulates state banks, credit unions, trust companies, and thousands of non-deposit companies such as mortgage, payday, money transmitters. We are fully funded by the entities we supervise. We do not take any taxpayer money. Our position count has remained stable over the last decade. At the same time, we constantly look at how we can right-size our staff. As far as the condition of the Tennessee banking system, the great majority of banks and credit unions are in a very good condition, serving their communities. We're watching closely the economic environment and how inflation and interest rate increases will affect financial institutions and their customers. One of the major accomplishments that we've had over the last couple of years was the ability of the department to go completely to off-site examinations. Some institutions now are asking for the opportunity to have face-to-face communication with examiners during an exam. So we are now implementing a hybrid examination as determined on an exam-by-exam basis and working with institution management. Our department is completely in a mobile working status. As a consequence, we are producing some material budget savings on an annual basis in the following areas. Because of a reduced travel schedule, we have returned lease cars to general services, and have cut back on exam travel significantly. Although there will be some return of examiner travel, travel costs will not be at pre-pandemic levels. We have reduced our dedicated department office space significantly, and taken all together, we're saving about $1 million in operating costs to the industry on an annual basis. And we need to be as effective and efficient as possible because there's growth occurring among some of our industries. For instance, the number of licensed money transmitters has doubled since 2015. During this session, we will be proposing a significant update of the Tennessee Money Transmitter Act that has not seen a major update in nearly 30 years. On the banking side, while we've seen consolidation over the last decade, we've also seen the Tennessee banking system grow over 350%. And perhaps the most impressive growth has been in the Tennessee trust industry. In 2015, we supervised $25 billion in trust assets. Today, the Tennessee trust industry is at $250 billion in assets, and we don't see that slowing down anytime soon. Another success is the creation of an internal IT supervisory group. Cybersecurity is a significant risk in the banking system, but institutions continue to work to ensure a safe banking environment for citizens. Our recently expanded IT program enhances our technical skill and ability to assess the IT operations of financial institutions and to better partner with the industry. We've worked with TEMA in the past to stage cybersecurity exercises with financial institutions. This past August, we had 100 financial institutions join us for that exercise. I want to also note the shared service agreements we have with F&A, General Services, and the Department of Human Resources. These 6 agreements, ranging from IT to HR services to purchasing and more, gives our department the ability to focus on supervising financial institutions and a little bit less on the day-to-day administrative responsibilities. Without them, I'm not sure we could fully meet our mission. From an internal standpoint, one of our greatest challenges remaining is staffing in certain areas and then salaries to retain and create more experience. The recent statewide compensation effort should make a significant positive impact on department compensation, especially in the entry-level examiner area. You know, it's all about creating experience in our examiner ranks because experience fuels meeting our mission. We want to avoid, again, a one-size-fits-all regulatory approach. We do that by assessing each institution on their own merits, and we rely heavily on experienced examiner judgment. A good example of that is the dialogue we're really starting to have with West Tennessee community banks regarding their plans and efforts to help develop the Blue Oval City ecosystem. We also continue to work with a number of our partners around the state to deal with elder financial exploitation. There's important collaboration happening between the public and private sector in that area. Finally, I would mention digital assets, which has previously raised a good deal of interest. A year ago, we had a number of inquiries from financial institutions, but over the last number of weeks and months, not as many inquiries. In some respects, we are looking for more developments coming out of Washington. Until then, we're having discussions with other agencies and with industry players. There's still a great deal to learn about digital assets and the risk in this area. And with that, we're happy to try to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, and I'm sure you've touched on a lot of information that our members will be interested in and with follow-up, but I want to thank you and just commend the work that your department has done. You mentioned about the strength of the banking system in Tennessee, and we all, well, most all of us remember when that wasn't in such good shape a few years ago when we had a really severe economic downturn. And as there are a lot of predictions about how we might be facing recession or from mild to severe, who knows, depends on which economist you listen to. But I think it gives me a lot of comfort to know that our banks are hopefully positioned much better this time around than perhaps they were in 2007, 2008. And I think a lot of that is because of the work that your organization has done to help make that so. So I think everybody in Tennessee will benefit from that, whether we have a recession or not. It's good to know that we have a banking industry that is a strong financial backbone for the state. I do have a number of questioners, beginning with Chairman Whitson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and good morning, Commissioner and team. Hey, just to start, I don't know if you watched that special on Netflix about Bernie Madoff. If you haven't, I recommend you watch it and all your people watch it. Okay, so it was chilling, I'm telling you. And but you hit on about the Elderly and Vulnerable Adult Financial Exploitation and Prevention Act, and it authorizes service providers to refuse or to delay a financial transaction if they suspect that. And you mentioned the public and private sector cooperation in this regard. Can the department provide an overview of the current state of elder and vulnerable adult financial exploitation in Tennessee, and details how the department works to prevent such exploitation? And what else can be done to help this population? I'm part of that population in the middle of the baby boom.
Well, thank you for the question, and that's a great question. There's a lot of activity that's going on. And, in 2017, there was a law passed that gave institutions the ability to pause transactions, to create a contact list that would help them help the elderly and vulnerable. So one of the things that we've done is on an exam by exam basis, not only for banks and credit unions, but for non-deposit companies as well. We're asking questions, we're bringing awareness to every institution through our exam process, and then trying to understand not only what they're doing, and it does seem to me that the great majority of institutions are fully aware of these issues, they're aware of the law, they're taking action. But we're also asking institutions, what are your challenges? What needs to be done from the government sector to be able to support institutions and therefore their customers? And that's what is being looked at now. One of the biggest things that is in consideration at this point is a hotline. And you all may have heard some discussion about that, where the TBI and Director Roush is suggesting a hotline effort so that institutions, banks, and credit unions can call if they have an issue in real time before money gets out the door. That would be incredibly important. So I'm not aware of another system like that in the country. So it's a great idea. I'm hoping something like that can happen. There are also there's efforts in different regions of the state. For one thing, we're participating with an East Tennessee coalition of financial institutions and law enforcement to talk about these issues and how we can bring awareness to Tennesseans. There's also an elder justice conference that happens on an annual basis. We're part of that. The governor has spoken there more than once. So there's just a lot of different efforts that are going on. And one of the most important things is to bring awareness to the public. Education, I think, is just going to be key. There are so many ways that citizens can be taken advantage of, and communication and awareness is just key in this area.
Next on the list, Chairman Boyd.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady, and it's great to see y'all today. Always good to hear from you. I know you've got about 26 vacancies, and it looks like 13 of them have been longer than a year. Which positions are y'all finding that are the hardest to fill?
Entry-level bank examiners are the real key for us. And, we've been looking at that for a long time. Our goal is to have all of those positions filled, but it seems like in recent years, we'll hire two and we'll lose one. I just got notice last week of examiner leaving for another opportunity. That's why I really do believe this compensation effort that's being made in state government comprehensively is going to help us. I'll just throw out some numbers here briefly. Our entry-level bank examiners were at 38,000, FDIC upper 50s, Federal Reserve upper 60s. So we really weren't competitive. And when you get into a potential downturn and you have federal and state regulators needing more resources, what we saw in years past was, from time to time, maybe losing an examiner to a federal agency. So now I'm hoping that with the support that we're receiving now, that we'll be able to be more competitive and be able to fill those vacancies. But of the 25 vacancies, 26 that we have now, the majority of those are in our banking area.
All right, just a follow-up on that along the lines of the, how long, once you get a person on board, I don't think they come fully vetted and trained, ready to go out and be a bank examiner. So what's the training turnaround time?
It takes about 5 years to fully train a bank examiner. So,
So we're
there may
training
be-
them for the feds and other folks. Is that basically what's happening?
At times, if we lose an examiner in year 5 of their work with us, the industry that pays our fees, they're not getting a return on investment. So I think we can really save the industry funding if we can keep our compensation of examiners current. It's, over nearly 40 years of looking at these issues, there's been real efforts along the last few decades, but sometimes it's been a one and done, and we've not really been able to maintain compensation and keep it current going forward. And then we have to catch up again. Hopefully, we can do better going forward.
I hope so, because 5 years is a lot of time and effort to walk out the door. Chairman Baum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of years ago, recently during the pandemic, your examinations were remote. Last year, you told us that you were adopting a hybrid model. Can you tell us a little more about how you decide which institutions to examine remotely versus which institutions to examine on site?
Yeah, that's a great question. What we have done for a long time is the risk scope examinations. Because no two institutions are alike. You have to risk scope them. You have to understand what's the risk profile of institutions. So, and also when you think about whether to make an examination hybrid, and in what degree, how much offsite, how much onsite activity, we're also having dialogue with that institution's management as well to understand what's their preference. I mean, there may be issues. There could be all kinds of issues as to why we want to have more on-site activity, but we also want to know, what does the institution management think about that as well? When we were completely off-site, we did have institution management come to us and say, you know what, I really would like to be able to look at an examiner in the eyes across the table to talk about certain issues. And so now we're making sure that we can, to the best of our ability, meet those needs. And it really is on an institution by institution basis.
And are these examinations, are they random or do they occur on a cycle after a certain period of time so that the institutions know when the examination is going to be coming?
Yeah, we'll ask for information ahead of time, and then we'll have conversations with the institution. So before we engage in the exam, they'll understand that we're coming, and we'll work on a schedule based on risk and based on size, and we'll have to engage in examinations based on that criteria and there's certain time schedules that we have to meet.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for being here.
And as part of a startup banking institution at one point, I know when you're in your infancy in that regard, there's a lot more attention. Those examinations are much more regular, so it does change based on, as you've said, with the risk profile of the institution. Representative McKenzie, I believe you have a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I do. It's good to see you. I guess I'll be seeing you in a couple of weeks, Commissioner. And I just wanted to follow up on the follow-up on employee, because employees and retention, because that's extremely valuable in terms of having a qualified workforce. Have you done, yeah, I know you talked about, you did a comparison between yourself and the FDIC and got the other institution, but have you done like a salary survey to see what the Metro Nashville area looks like compared to your entry level people? And to your latter point, that may be something you want to do every 3 to 5 years to make sure that your staff is staying current. I don't think we can probably exceed some of these high paying, extremely high paying areas, but to stay competitive with these institutions.
We are required to do a salary survey and looking at other states, for instance, and we also compare ourselves to federal regulators. And I'll also mention this, we have a shared service agreement with the Department of Human Resources now. So we have access, I think, to greater assistance from DOHR with regard to strategic thinking when it comes to employment issues. So they've been very helpful to us in understanding where we stand and then what things we ought to be thinking about going forward to attract and retain. So, just as I'd mentioned earlier, until this recent compensation study and the push out of initial funding, we were at 38 on entry-level bank examiners, where FDIC upper 50s and Federal Reserve upper 60s, we just weren't competitive. We're getting into a better position now. We've still got more work to do. We'll be looking at all that's happened from this study, but I really feel good about the direction.
All right, members, are there further questions? Oh, I'm sorry, Representative Lynn.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. One risk that I came across for small businesses recently is that small businesses who have various locations have to give their employees have to make a cash deposit. And in order to make that cash deposit, you have to give the deposit tickets to an employee. And that, I've discovered, is a risk because fraud can ensue. And maybe other folks could get a hold of those tickets and get into your account. The bank was very wonderful about it, all of that. But I did talk to the Tennessee bankers about, is there any talk about maybe making a system where for all of these businesses that have employees where you have to give them deposit tickets so they can make cash deposits, could these tickets have, say, a QR code or something instead of a number? And she liked that idea. She said she was going to share it, but I just wanted to run that by you too, because it is a risk. It is a risk. You don't want to give an account number to an employee. You don't want to, but unfortunately you have to. So it'd be really nice if there was a system where that didn't have to happen. They had no idea, what the account number was, and just find a way to eliminate certain risk. I just wanted to share that with you.
Okay.
And hopefully maybe something can come of it.
Okay. Thank you for sharing it.
Well, Director Gonzalez, thank you for being here this morning. It's always interesting to hear from you and know I always feel better after hearing you talk about as I said earlier, about the safety of our financial institutions and the fact that I think Tennesseans can rest easily that the dollars that they have stored or invested or whatever in our banking institutions in the state are being well managed, and that they'll be there when they get ready to pull them out. So thank you again for coming, and we will let you get on back to do some useful work and we will proceed with our hearing. So thank you. Next, we have our Board of Parole. And we will be sure to tell Chairman Montgomery that it took 4 people to replace him for this presentation, but welcome and please introduce yourselves.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, committee. My name is Jim Provence. I have the pleasure of serving as Executive Director for the Tennessee Board of Parole. As you can tell, Chairman Montgomery is not here this morning. He is recovering from knee replacement surgery in Sevier County. He's doing very well. My phone is vibrating right now, so I'm pretty sure it's him calling to see if I turned the ringer off on my phone. So if he is watching, you didn't catch me, boss. You trained me well. With me this morning, to my right, your left, is our General Counsel, Rob Clark. To my left is Administrator Cindy Taylor, who's over our Management Resources Division, which does include budget. My far left is Administrator Amber Lineberry, who's over our Hearings Division and Board Operations. And in the crowd, if you'll stand up, Sarah, I want to introduce Miss Sarah Snyder. She is our new Legislative Liaison. She will be here with you all. I think this is our second, maybe third week. So if there's anything the board can help you all with, please grab her in the hall or call her. If you can't find her, please call any of us. And also back row is our Communications Director, Dustin Krugel. If I may, Madam Chair, just give a brief overview of our agency. We do have 82 staff members scattered across the state. We are a small agency. Our board members and hearing officers, again, are located all throughout the state, literally from Memphis all the way up to east. Our board members are comprised of 7 members that are appointed by the governor. They serve 6-year terms that are all staggered. And there's a misconception that our board members and our board, we only work part-time. We only come in for meetings. That's not the case. It's a conversation that we have every year with DOHR. Our members and their assistants are full-time employees in the office every day, just like we are here in the central office. We also process executive clemency applications for the governor, conduct hearings where needed, and make a non-binding recommendation to the governor on those hearings. Last year, we conducted 13,750 hearings. 750 of those were heard by the board members alone. The board members hear the most serious cases, but they do review and vote on every hearing. We issued 3,413 parole certificates. We revoked 1,255 offenders for parole violations. And we're very proud of our Victim Services Division. You can see our stats there of how they support the victims. Current budget this year is $9,726,800. This year, next fiscal year, 23-14, we are requesting $10,429,400. And our 1% reduction target is 96.8. We are, I'm going to change this number here on you in a minute. Our improvement request was originally listed at 702,600. We are decreasing that number, and I'll get to that in just a moment. Our areas of improvement that we would like to ask for you all to consider. Our first priority is in our hearings division. That number is going to change. That number is going to go down. We were very fortunate with the DOHR market study that came out. They did raise the pay of our hearing officers. It did alleviate some of our problems. We're still having some compression issues that we would like to ask for funding. And in our docket tech series, the ones who work up the files and get them ready to be heard, we would like to add a 4th step to that job class to give a little promotional room there for our staff. We also have some significant technology upgrades we need to perform. We have 3 video systems located in our central office that are approaching end of life. SDS has strongly suggested that we look at replacing those. We have included that in our budget request. And also, we're having problems out in the field in our board members' offices with their bandwidth. Board members conduct their hearings via video system directly to the prisons. They're currently running on about 4 megabytes of speed. It is not enough. Signals are dropping. Pictures are not good. I'm embarrassed to say we've even had to continue a few hearings because they just could not get a good connection with the prisons. We asked STS to look into it, offer us some help. They have suggested 20 megabytes in each office. They are telling us they can accommodate that in all of our offices, and it will address our signal issues. We respectfully request that. We're also asking for a new HR position. Our HR is staffed by 3 individuals. We have a director, assistant director, and our third staffer is dedicated strictly to training. Our HR director is spending most of her time meeting with DOHR, doing studies. And quite frankly, we need another person in that can handle Edison transactions, can help us in recruiting, onboarding, and just overall support and management. Finally, our fourth priority, we were requesting a new position to go in our board operations division, a person who could coordinate local jail video hearings. We have begun an endeavor to try to have more local jails come online where we can be able to conduct hearings via MS Teams. We have some areas in the state that a hearing officer will spend a couple of hours on the road just to get to the facility, and there may only be 2 or 3 hearings there to conduct. We want to try to we want to try to get more of those to come online with video. I think we all proved during COVID we can operate electronically, and we want to try to expand on that. And it's not just to save some time for the hearing officers or to save some money for the state. We also want to do this in the event a hearing officer is sick. If they cannot travel to that prison, but we're able to operate via video, there could be a hearing official from another part of the state who could quickly review that hearing, jump online and do that hearing, or even in a worst case scenario, our administrator down here or our director of the hearings division could even jump online and conduct that hearing. Now, again, we are reducing our requests from 702,600 to 501,800. And that is due in whole part to DOHR's new compensation plan that helped us with our hearing officials. And Chairman Montgomery did want me to mention how grateful we are to DOHR for helping us seeing our problem. It is a great start for us. We are very excited. This is going to help us recruit and retain hearing officers and staff in our board operations division. Our reduction target is unfortunately would require 2 positions. We don't have a lot of above the line funding that we can draw from. So we would be looking at giving up 2 full-time positions that are currently filled. I know I have been a little brief. I wanted to stay within your 5-minute timeline, Madam Chair, but we would be happy to entertain any questions you all may have.
We appreciate the brevity, and I think we'll have an opportunity to flesh out any additional information that we need through our questions. And first question on my list is Chairman Williams.
Thank you. Thank you. Did a great job standing in for Richard. Of course, we miss his voice probably more than anything. So anyways, he used to be my suite mate. So if he's listening, I hope he gets well soon. I know he's just trying to improve his golf game. But I had a couple questions regarding vacancies. Obviously, you said earlier you had 82 positions. I think you've got more than a dozen of those are unfilled currently. I guess the question would be, what's causing that? Are you having difficulty? What are you trying to do to mitigate the loss of your current staff? So if you could help me with that, I'd appreciate it.
Great question. Thank you for asking that. Yeah, it's been tough the last few years on hiring staff. This is the first time in my career with the Board of Parole that, people have left, and we have not been able to easily recruit. We think one of the biggest problems in our hearings division has been the pay. It is no big secret. Our candidate pool came from the Tennessee Department of Correction, basically the probation and parole officers. The great work the Department of Correction did to raise the pay of their parole officers basically just priced those folks out from coming and joining us because it not only would have been a demotion, but it would have been a huge cut in pay.
Mhm.
We've also, Board of Parole has always been an agency where people come and they stay a long time. They
Mhm.
retire from the agency. And we're starting to hit that mark where a lot of folks are reaching the 20, 25, 30 years worth of service and they're going home and we're having difficulties backfilling. I will say, Administrator Lineberry here was telling me yesterday, we have posted 3 hearing officers positions. We are seeing some activity. We are receiving some phone calls. I can't tell you how many times we've posted, we either didn't have a candidate list, no one applied, or the candidates that did apply, they just weren't anywhere close to what we needed to be. We've also had an issue too. The last 3 hearing officers we hired, only one is still with us. And I think that's due in part too, is our candidate pool is not as strong as it used to be. And we get in a situation where we're taking a few risks to hire employees that quite frankly, 5 years ago, we wouldn't have taken.
Okay. One of the other things that we did last year was obviously a new position was for executive clemency position. And so wondered where you were in the process about filling that position, or if it has been filled, if that person is now seated in your department.
Yes, sir. We did recently fill that position. She is training right now and it has been a tremendous help. And we thank you all for giving us that position.
Okay. Thank you.
Representative Freeman, I believe that you're next. You're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I've got 2 questions. I'll ask them both at the same time. What percentage of appellate requests result in new hearings? And if a new hearing is found to be needed, when does that typically take place? When is that conducted?
Rob Clark, General Counsel for the Board of Parole. Thank you for the question, Representative Freeman. I'm not sure that the percentage of appeals granted statistic is tracked. I'm looking at our Administrator, Amber Lineberry. I can't answer the second part of your question to say that that will be statutorily governed as far as the timeline for granting a hearing. If we were granting an appeal hearing for a parole grant hearing, given a new hearing for that, there's a 30-day statutory notification process that has to take place. So that one would be scheduled out at least 30 days in advance, where if we were redoing a revocation hearing on appeal, we could get to that one sooner because the statutory notification period is not as long. I think that would largely go to the workload of the division. And if Ms. Lineberry would like to add anything to that about how the appeals are processed and rescheduled.
Good morning. Amber Lineberry, Parole Administrator. We do process several appeals throughout the year. We review those and then they are, either granted or denied, and then we schedule the hearing. We always try to get those back on the docket as quickly as possible. And as Mr. Clark said, I don't believe we track the percentage of appeals to my knowledge.
And
Representative Freeman.
I appreciate that you don't track it, but is it 5%, 50%, 100%? I mean, do you have any gauge to guess a range of where you believe they are?
I don't. We could get a number of hearings granted. I don't have a percentage, but I think we could do that.
It will not be 50%,
No, sir.
Representative. My best guess would probably be in the 10 percentile range. We will work to get you a number. And we do receive a lot of appeals that are not really based on merit.
Understood. Thank you.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for being here. Just kind of walk me through the parole process, if you would. If a person is up for parole and they pretty much done their time, et cetera, so forth, what are the determinations that you all make in terms of them qualifying for it?
Thank you, sir, for the question. There are many factors that the parole board members look at when they are determining if a person is a safe risk to be released into the community. There's not just one magic tool they have. They will look at the offender's history. They will look at how that offender has behaved in the institution, the programming they've had. They will look at the results of the validated risk needs assessment that is conducted by the Department of Correction. They will also look to see what type of support the offender has in the community. And they also will listen to the victims, their input, and listen to the opinions and words from law enforcement that are offered an opportunity to weigh in on the case.
Most, of course, naturally, we get that, but most of my complaints are from people who will say they were up for parole, they qualified and didn't get it. And I guess I'm just trying to figure out what that process, recidivism rate is very high. And I'm just trying to understand really and truly what qualifies a person, as you just explained, to get parole, so that when that time comes, if they meet their qualifications, why would they not get it?
I can't really tell you in a wide situation why an offender might not be granted parole. I will tell you, if their parole is denied, they are told how they can improve their chances of being paroled. But as far as there just being one answer as to why, I'm sorry, sir, that's just not something we could give
But
you.
they do get an explanation as to how you can improve it. And the next time you up, if you've made that improvement, then that could very well work for you.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
sir.
Okay.
And you will hear, excuse me, you will hear recommendations be to, excuse me, continue programming
Mhm.
that you're currently in, or to continue your good behavior, positive behavior in prison.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of questions. You had mentioned some staffing, challenges, et cetera, with folks retiring out of the program and whatnot. I'm looking at the numbers and it says you've got 13,750 hearings that y'all have conducted for folks that are eligible for parole. And while I practice law, I'm not a criminal lawyer, so I don't know all the details of how parole works, but my friend from West Tennessee asked a little bit about, but I'm going to kind of expound on what he was asking. If someone that's convicted of murder and they're eligible for parole after a certain percentage of the time that their sentence was ordered by the judge, and they're eligible for parole, and they're denied, let's say the first time, how many times can they come back to the parole board and ask to be for parole again? Is there a limit? How many times can they come back?
Thank you for the question, sir. Well, they don't ask for parole. If a murderer or if any offender is heard and they're denied parole, the board will say, we will hear you again in 1 year up to 6 years. But a parolee does not ask to come before parole. Excuse me, an offender does not ask to come before parole. The only thing an offender could ask for would be some form of clemency.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So how often what's the average of that happening? If they're not asking for it, why is the board, once they deny it, what's the purpose of revisiting someone's parole once they've been denied if they're a murderer?
Thank you for the question, Representative Garrett. In part of the decision-making process, there's Supreme Court precedent that governed that created the 6-year time period. The legislature subsequently changed that time period to 10 years, but then moved it back to 6 for certain crimes. In the kind of case that you're talking about, a first-degree murder, that person could be put off for up to 10 years before their subsequent consideration. Ultimately, the ultimate bellwether of any case is public safety. Can this person be safely released to the public without creating an undue risk? And our board members have that in mind the whole time. Also, the impact that it's going to have on victims, the impact it's going to have on the community, the relative opinions of law enforcement, the sentencing judge, the district attorney. All of those factors kind of go into way, and they'll also be taking a great look at how that person has behaved during the statutorily imposed percentage of their sentence that they were required to serve before they could be considered. So if someone's been in there getting write-ups, they're committing additional crimes inside, any number of things that might reflect poorly on them in there, those kinds of things might work against an offender to where they might not come back up for a hearing as soon as someone who had been towing the line, doing everything they did and completing their programming. But it's on such a case-by-case individual basis, it's hard to really put a finger on one thing that would drive that, sir.
Representative Garrett, you have a follow-up?
Yes, please. Thank you, Madam Chair. So regardless if it's a serious crime or relatively unserious crime, and the person's up for parole, they are denied that parole. On average, how often do they come back for another chance for parole? Not at their request, obviously, but from the decision of the parole board. What's the average that they come back? What's the average amount of times that someone can come back for parole, which then invokes the families to be a part of that process and relive the victimhood all over again? What is the average amount of time that people come back and seek parole after they've been denied?
Thank you for the question, sir. That is not something we can track.
Is it something you can track?
I'm sorry, I misspoke. That is not something we track, but it is certainly something that we can look at. I don't think that's something we'll certainly look into and get to you and to the committee as well.
So thank you, and I appreciate that, but you're saying you can track that, but you don't currently track that.
That is correct.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much.
Yep.
And if you'll just get that information to my office, then we'll share it with the committee as a whole. Leader Lamberth.
Okay, a couple of questions. One, for the first time in probably 10 years down here, I've heard you guys say you don't track this, you don't track that. I've asked for parole grant rates for years, and you've always tracked it. So please track virtually all of this. I mean, because you're going to get that question almost every year. I mean, we're going to want to know, how often are folks up for parole? How often are they granted? How often are they denied? And for what reasons? I mean, that's going to be a pretty standard question. It almost always has been. So I'm going to ask this, and hopefully, since it is something you've tracked since the inception of the parole board, you'll have this answer. What is the parole grant rate for individuals that are up for parole right now this year?
For last fiscal year, it was 31.5% later.
All right, so 31.5% of the folks that came before the parole board were granted parole.
Correct, sir.
Thank you. I figured you would have that one. And then the rest of it, if you can get to us, I agree with the chairman. Please, for goodness sakes, get us those answers. We need those. What is your current reserve fund balance?
You know, off the top of your head, what reserve is.
Good morning. Thank you. I'm Cindy Taylor. I am a parole administrator. Excuse me, I've been sick, so my voice is crazy. I don't have that number right off the top of my head, but I can certainly get it to you.
Do you have an estimate of what it was maybe the last time it was checked? I mean, a range?
How much we've given back?
No. Do you have a reserve fund balance? And if so, how much?
No, we do not.
You do not carry reserve fund balance?
No, we do not.
Great. I was going to ask if you do not carry one, then that goes to the request for the one-time funds for technology.
Yes.
We have a lot of entities that come before us, and if they have a reserve fund balance, many of them will use them for technology upgrades for one time. But if you don't carry one, that's not an issue.
We do not.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Next on the list, Representative Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Looking at the 13,750 hearings in 21-22, how many individuals does that account for? In other words, was that 2,000 individuals under the 13,750, or was it 5,000? How many individuals?
I can't tell you an exact number, but I can tell you it'll be probably around 13,000 unique individuals.
Okay.
Very rarely is there two hearings in a 1 year unless it's something.
So about
very rarely.
13,000. Okay, okay. And then there was 3,413 parole certificates. How do we define what happens when an individual receives a certificate?
Great question, sir. When we grant someone parole and Tennessee Department of Correction goes through all their checks and they say the offender is ready to go out the door, they notify us, we create a parole certificate. That certificate is sent to the offender via TDOC. They sign that certificate, it is negotiated, and then the person is released into the community according to their parole guidelines.
They're released into the community.
Yes.
And then there was 1,255 offenders for parole violations. So that individuals that you just released.
Not necessarily.
Hypothetically.
Sorry, sir. Thank you for the question. Not necessarily. That could be offenders who are already on parole in the community. They may have been in the community for months to years.
So what happens when the offender and the parole, is revoked? What happens to that individual at that time?
The person will have a hearing to determine if they're going to be revoked or not. If the offender is revoked, they will go back into incarceration.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Chairman Faison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have a question, but I do have a statement for y'all. You said something that caught my attention, and I think it needs to be addressed. You said the bellwether when deciding to let a person out or not is whether they're safe to society. Committee, I want you to understand that should not be the bellwether. It never should be. The bellwether should be, has justice been served? There might be somebody who's safe to society, but justice hasn't been served correctly. And so I would just encourage the parole board to reconsider their matrix of whether a person should go out or not by what they're safe. Because that just kind of bothered me. If I was a victim's family, and I don't think that that's the proper bellwether for me. I want to know that justice has taken place. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I would perhaps put an amendment on that. I'd like to know that they're going to be safe as well. So maybe a two-part bellwether, but let's not let them out even if justice has been served and they're not viewed to be safe. So we thank you for that. Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I agree that I would like to start seeing this data, but I'll make an additional request in terms of the crosscut of it, of that, like you said, 31% or the total. I'd like to see what number of these offenders that are being released are for violent crimes and what percent are for nonviolence. Because I think sometimes we focus a little too much on those violent offenders at the peril of the nonviolent ones. I think we need to keep them in that bin. But when we talk about this globally and you bring us back numbers that are global, it might tend to skew potential decisions, thinking that this committee or the legislators wanting, all put everybody in one bucket. So as you all are crunching those numbers for us for next year, I'd like to see what those percentages look like from violent and nonviolent.
Thank you, sir. Another great suggestion. Thank you very much.
Representative Barrett.
Thank you for offering the rate of or percentage that you're granting parole requests or parole reviews. And I understand from your numbers that you provided that there were 1,255 revocations in the last fiscal year. Is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
My question is this: what is the revocation rate, period, across the board for every parolee that you've ever granted? What is the revocation rate? How many of them end up being revoked? If you don't know that, why
Yeah.
don't you know that?
Yeah, we don't know that. You want to answer it from a data standpoint?
Good morning. We don't have from the beginning of time. Thomas doesn't actually track, from the beginning of time. We do have it by fiscal year. So we have right now, I think the last 5 years, how many people have been revoked each year, but we could go back as far as Thomas goes back.
So the reason I asked this question is you mentioned that revocations aren't necessarily people that were just recently let out. They may have been out 5 years, 10 years, whatever the case may be. So in order for us to fully understand exactly what the success rate is of the parole program, we need to know how many people are failing and being revoked and coming back into the system. That's going to tell us whether or not the criteria that you have that you're using to actually grant parole is working. So I would like for you to track that and provide that information.
I'd also like to say correction does look at recidivism, and as part of that, they look at whether they were on parole, probation, and when they recidivated, excuse me. So correction does look at recidivism, which plays a part in that.
Thank you.
And there is an overlap. I was going to mention that recidivism rates and parole revocation rates, sometimes those people are in the same, they're in both buckets. So
Yeah, and some people might be in this revocation bucket more than 1 year. And so they came out, were revoked, got released again, and in another year revoked, sometime down the road. So they could be in the bucket twice also.
All right, are there further questions? Chairman Hicks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I don't have a question. I just have more of a statement, I guess, more than anything. Tuesday, I received a call from a constituent that her and her husband were at the prison here in Nashville ready to pick up their daughter. She fell under the criteria that she had been paroled and she had went through everything that she needed to be done for one little step. And so they had drove 5 hours down here and they were sitting there waiting. And I want to say that I contacted Rob Clark there, and Rob grabbed the bull by the horn, so to speak, and they were able to get her out right at the end of the day. And so I do want to say you all are very responsive, and I want to thank you for what you do. You all have a tough job, and the committee, the board, you all see some very dire circumstances and situations. But I want to say when I call upon you all react very quickly, and not necessarily because of me, but that's responding quickly to my constituents. And I want to say thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And for any member of the General Assembly or really any member of the public that brings a legitimate concern in front of the board, we hope to act as fast as we possibly can to make sure that the law is being followed.
I don't believe that we have any more questions. I'll just add to what Chairman Hicks said. You all do have a very difficult job. It's quite the balancing act to, as Chairman Faison said, we want to make sure that justice is served. We want to make sure that if these people are released, then they're going to be no threat to the community. At the same time, we don't want to keep people in jail who have completed some sort of rehabilitation and are ready, willing, and able to be a productive member of society. It costs money. And that's not the driving factor. But again, you have a tough job determining the balance, and we're all human, and people have circumstances in their lives that change sometimes once they're on the outside. So for good or for bad. So I wouldn't expect that everybody that you paroled would end up, a success story. There are obviously going to be those who don't, but again, finding a way to deal with those folks. And I think Representative McKenzie has made a great point. There's a lot of difference between a violent and nonviolent offender in terms of the threat to the society and probably the ability to be integrated, if you will, back into society as a whole and become productive. So I do think it would be important to keep those two buckets separate. And we look forward to getting the information that's been requested here today to the best of your ability, and we'll certainly share that with our committee. But Mr. Provence, thank you, Director Provence, for being here today and doing an able job in Chairman Montgomery's absence. We do wish him a speedy recovery for his sake, but his wife is a really dear friend of mine, and even more for her sake, we're wishing that he would recover very quickly and get out of the house. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee.
Well, we're going to continue with our theme here of talking about folks that are in our penal system. We're going to ask the folks from Tricor. Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped over someone. I apologize. And I am just going to say Justina because I always butcher your last name. So welcome and thank you for being here. And again, I apologize for just getting ahead of myself on our schedule for this morning. I was looking at the folks from Tricor and just skipped over you, which is a bad thing to do because you all serve just a vital purpose in this state. And again, welcome. Introduce yourselves, and then we will look forward to hearing what you have to tell us this morning.
Problem, and thank you. My name is Justina Scalpone. I'm the post-conviction defender, and with me today is Tracy Pointer, who is our fiscal director. Thank you very much for considering our budget request this year. I'll start with a very short overview. So as you know, we're a small judicial branch agency, and we represent clients on death row in state post-conviction proceedings. State post-conviction is the one comprehensive appellate review of a capital conviction and sentence. What we do is we reinvestigate the offense that led to the conviction, the life history of the clients, and the aggravating circumstances that led to the death sentence, and then the legal process itself up to the point of the commencement of post-conviction proceedings. We represent clients across the state. We're basically presumptive counsel for all death cases in state post-conviction. We do also have clients in clemency proceedings sometimes as well. Our budget request this year is $3.4 million, and that includes two improvements. So the first one is the same improvement that we ask for every year, and that is the mandatory statutory step raises for our attorneys. The amount of that is $38,100, and that is based on the current experience of our attorney staff. We are tied to the public defender pay scale. The second improvement is expert funding, and that is in the amount of $280,000. We're asking for it. It's non-reoccurring, but we're asking for it over the next 3 years, $280,000 annually. So that makes our full improvement for the next fiscal year $3,018,000. I will focus mostly on the expert funding because that is the new request for us this year. And I've talked to some of you about it already prior to the hearing. Expert assistance is essential part of capital post-conviction review. It's an essential part of any capital case at the trial level as well. We deal with a lot of complicated issues that as attorneys we do not have an expertise in, and that can be either crime scene investigation, and can be DNA evidence, mental illness, intellectual disability, brain damage. It can be media saturation and publicity, and the fairness of the venue at the trial. So there's a wide range of issues that the experts in capital cases need to look at. Just as very specific couple of examples of how the expert witness testimony played out in post-conviction or in federal habeas, which is the next level of review in federal court. In Tennessee. So one example is a case that was handled by our office, and that was the medical examiner who was hired by our team that reviewed the medical evidence in the case and the medical testimony, and established, and the court agreed that the crime was not even a homicide, it was accidental death. That's one example. Another one is that was in federal habeas, and that is new DNA evidence that was tested in post-conviction and exonerated the client. It also showed that biological evidence that tied him to the crime was actually deposited on his clothes after it was collected from an autopsy. So it was a mistake where the evidence was spilled on the clothes after the arrest. So he was exonerated as well. And then there are examples that go beyond conviction, so that are more relevant to sentencing. But there's a number of cases where experts evaluated clients and reviewed relevant records and established that they were intellectually disabled, which means that they shouldn't have gotten the death penalty in the first place. They're not eligible for it. So we use expert witnesses in our cases all the time, but it is one expense that we don't have funds allocated for in our budget. What we do instead is we obtain funding through Tennessee Supreme Court Rule 13 from the Indigent Representation Fund. And that is housed in the AOC budget. It is a pretty protracted and not very efficient process. It is one expert, one case at a time. Rule 13 has expert rates or caps on hourly expert rates, and also a cap on how much you can get for expert services in a capital post-conviction case total. And those rates have not been raised in 20 years. And we are having more and more difficult time finding quality experts that will testify or consult with us on our cases. We've had experts that we used many times before. They have retired, and some of them are they're still willing to cut their rates. They're just not willing to cut it as much as the rates in the Rule 13 require. And I know that that's an issue kind of across board and with other people in criminal defense as well. And 5 years ago, it will be in April this year, the Indigent Representation Task Force that actually Majority Leader Lambert was a member of, looked at this issue among many others. And the task force did say that the expert rates in Rule 13 were too low and they needed to be raised. Incidentally, that same commission or task force also said that funding for criminal defense, experts included, should come not from the court's budget, but from the independent defense budget. Neither one of those recommendations has been implemented. And so we're continuing to obtain the funds through the courts, through Rule 13. And what this requires is once we find the experts that are willing to work for the rates, we draft motions, file them with the court where the post-conviction case is pending, explaining why we need the funding. 99% of the time, the courts are going to grant that funding. Sometimes they'll do it right after the hearing. Sometimes they take it under advisement. The process itself can last between weeks and months sometimes. And then even after the court orders the funding, then that court order has to go up to the administrative office of the courts. There, the director of the AOC approves it. If the director of the AOC disagrees with that, it goes up to the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in his administrative role, not as a judge. And his or her decision is final. So it used to be that the approval by the AOC was pretty routine. In the last few years, we've had funding in multiple instances granted by the court, but then denied by the AOC. It actually created an issue in one of our cases that is pending right now in the Tennessee Supreme Court, where we went to an evidentiary hearing in a capital case without any mental health experts, which was the first time ever really in our office, and it's extremely unusual. So it added another layer of litigation into the cases. Given all those issues that I'm describing, we would like to have expert funding in our own budget. We already pay for everything else out of our own budget. So, for example, a private appointed attorney has to go through the Indigent Representation, to the Indigent Representation Fund and get paid for their legal fees, for investigative resources, all of it comes. They have to do that. but they don't have a budget like we do. We have a budget for the investigative resources already. We have our investigators, we pay for their travel expenses. We cover everything related to our practice except for the experts. So it makes sense. It would be more streamlined and simple for us to be able to have the funds in our budget and simply pay the expert that we need to pay. It is already what the District Attorney General Conference does. It is what the Attorney General's office does. They don't go to court asking for expert funding. They have it in their budget. So the amount itself, the $280,000, that is based on what the AOC and the judges had approved before in a fully litigated and fully funded capital post-conviction case. And then also based on our current caseload and our projected caseload over the next 3 years. And then also it's raised by about 25% just to account for the difference in expert rates. So when I'm looking at what the AOC had approved before, that was based on the really low rates already. So the 25% increase doesn't get us to what the market rates actually are, but it does give us at least some flexibility to negotiate with experts. A lot of the experts are going to give us a public interest rate. They do that. They just have to. It's just higher than what the Rule 13 asks for right now. So to sum up, this is something that we need to maintain quality representation for our clients, and it's also going just to help us do our job more efficiently. So I will stop with that, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. And I'll try to do my best, Dr. Scalpone.
It can be Justina, it's okay.
You all have an extremely difficult job, and it truly is a life or death matter that you're dealing with. And I guess I have just sort of a general question before we get into our other questioners. When you mention like the case that you went to without an expert witness, a mental health expert, if that goes to the next level, when it goes to the federal level, I would assume that you mentioned another layer of litigation. That layer would be because this person didn't have effective assessment and so forth. So again, that just continues this cycle, lengthens the cycle for this whole appeals process.
Exactly.
Am I correct? And so there's a cost to not having these expert witnesses. I guess that's the bottom line of what I'm trying to make sure I'm understanding.
Yes, that is true.
All right, first on my list, Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for being here
Thank you.
today. We appreciate it. And I just want to make sure I understand, you all primarily handle the death penalty cases that are referred to your offices.
Only death penalty cases, yeah.
And when they're referred, how's that process? Is it, because my understanding is it's somewhat automatic that someone that's convicted for the death penalty, et cetera, they typically appeal. And if they can't afford a counsel on their own, how does that process take place when that particular matter is referred or transferred to your office?
Sure. So because we're a presumptive counsel for those cases, what happens, we track the cases. So we know the case, how many cases are pending in the trial courts at any time. Then we track them through direct appeal. And once the direct appeal is decided and the sentence and the conviction are affirmed, we start a communication with the direct appeal counsel and talking about the transition of the case into our office. And then the client files a petition asking the court to appoint us. And we get a permission from the direct appeal counsel to go meet with that prospective client, explain what the process is, how it works, what they need to do, and then assist them with doing that. And then we're appointed by the court.
Okay. And then okay.
Representative Garrett, continue.
Thank you. And I've been habit that, so I apologize, Madam Chair. I haven't been asking your permission to ask another question, so I appreciate that. How often does a person that's been convicted and the death penalty ensues has private counsel?
In post-conviction,
Mm-hmm.
it's rare. It usually happens if our office has a conflict.
Okay. And if they could afford that private counsel. The
Oh, I'm
expenses,
sorry, but-
I mean,
Yeah.
separate, not appointed counsel. They
So
have their
yes,
own.
sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. So
Mhm.
like in terms of conflict, it's a private attorney, but it's still an appointed private attorney there. I am not aware of any non-indigent people on death row.
Right, that was sort of my
Yeah.
point. There were, the cost of that would be astronomical
Yes.
for having private counsel throughout this entire process.
Yes.
So the work that you do is pretty phenomenal. What that it would cost in the private sector. So I asked that question because, the pandemic happened in case, and especially in the criminal court, got delayed. I mean, are you seeing that impact your office with the cases that are referred, that there's some sort of backlog for the cases that you're handling due to a lot of courts weren't even open during that time to operate. So has that affected your office at all?
So it's basically slowed down the cases coming into our office because the backlog was primarily in the trial courts. So those cases are taking longer to come to our office. And for our particular cases, it lengthened the time of the proceedings because there was about a year there, but we couldn't do investigation like with expert witness, and you have to do investigation. So for expert witnesses, for example, to give them the evidence that they need to look at. So that delayed that. Experts couldn't even visit clients. So that made the cases stay longer in our office.
Okay.
The caseload remained the same.
Okay. Thank you. That's the question. Thank you very much for that.
Leader Cochran, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just the nature of what your office does on a daily basis, I know that requires a lot of expertise and a lot of research abilities. And so I think according to the last questionnaire that you submitted to our committee, you've got 20 full-time positions. All of those are filled, no vacancies, and which is great. So my question is, if in the next year, several of those folks left for whatever reason, retirement, pursuing another career, let's say if 6 of those 20 left, how do you adapt to that? Again, just because of the expertise that is required, how does your office adapt? So that's the first part of the question. And the second is, and it's hard to predict, but do you foresee that happening? Or do you feel like maybe your staffing will remain fairly stable?
Yes, sorry. So one, we actually do have a couple of vacancies right now, but they're very recent. So they're not long-term. They just happened within the last month. So we're actually dealing with the situation that you're talking about. So when we do get the vacancies, we obviously immediately post and we start searching for qualified people. And we have put a lot of effort into having a good supervision structure in our office and good training, because we just have to hire people that we have to train. And that's just that's the reality of it. So that's how we deal with it. And when we do look for people, I mean, we post nationally. We post on various relevant listservs. I mean, we obviously locally as well, but it takes a lot of effort to try and recruit good people. But we focus on training a lot for that reason.
Leader Cochran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so in general, just over the last several years, is it pretty stable? I mean, so you mentioned you've got 2 vacancies now. Is that pretty normal, par for the course?
Yes, but it's pretty normal. It's usually a couple vacancies in a year.
Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you very much.
Chairman Hawk.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members. Ms. Scalpone, I want to go back to where Chair Lady Hazelwood was leading us a few moments ago about the expert funding and the request for that. Absent more readily available funding for experts, how can this specifically delay justice? If you could talk about time frame, if you could talk about a judge particularly looking for expert witness to testify in this case, give me a time frame of what we're looking at if these funds are not available.
So it would be, like I said, it can take about a few weeks and can take months for that to happen. So it's, if you it's when you ask for the expert funding, the process itself, the way it's going, it injects, and especially if you don't get the funding, like in the cases where the AOC didn't approve, it injects a whole other level of litigation into the case, and creates legal issues that have to go all the way up on appeal as well. So it prolongs the life of the case in state post-conviction, and it is going to also complicate things if the case goes on to federal habeas for those very same reasons, because then they're going to say the client did not get a proper post-conviction review in state court. And it might end up that that the federal court may not give the deference to the state courts that it typically does for that reason.
Chairman Hawk, you have a follow-up?
Yes, ma'am. Just briefly, and maybe more of a point in terms of a comment. I think we're also seeing justice delayed for the victims of these particular situations. So I think that justice delayed for the families of these individuals who've already experienced bad situations. This may speed that up. So I see where you're coming from. I appreciate the request, and we'll certainly give it due conversation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Leader Lamberth.
Well, now that the dean of the caucus has spoken, we'll only say this. I wish that y'all's office was not necessary. You and I've spoken several times. When I first came in as a freshman, I thought, boy, this is one way we can trim the budget right here. We can do away with this particular office. But I am glad of the job that y'all do, because if we have the death penalty, I support it. I think most of us do. If we're going to execute a citizen, we need to make sure that person is guilty of the crime that they committed, and that every T's been crossed and every I's been dotted. It needs to be done in an expeditious fashion. It needs to be done efficiently, and I know that you all do that. But justice matters and truth matters. And so thank you for the job that you do. Again, I truly wish it wasn't necessary, but I'd rather y'all be doing it than somebody else. And so thank you very much for everything you do. Just wanted to add that out there.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
We do thank you for what you do. I think in your opening remarks, several of us were looking at each other up here. There's some scary situations when obviously a situation, someone who was innocent was charged, and it had gotten to as far as your review. So that is pretty frightening to think that could happen. So knowing that you're there as that last line of defense, or at least last line at the state level, to make sure that someone who's convicted is, that is, we've talked a lot this morning about justice being served, and that's what we want. And I feel that you all help make sure that happens. So thank you. Representative Miller, did you have a comment or a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Yes, 1995, OPCD was established. When you mentioned your caseload, what is your current caseload?
Yeah, our current caseload is 13, so we have 13 cases right now. And over the last 5 years, the average caseload is right between 12 and 13.
And I guess my next question or statement, what is your ultimate goal for those 13? If you were to establish for yourself, what is that ultimate goal?
I think the ultimate goal is we have the ethical obligation to obtain relief for those clients. That's our.
Okay. I mean, just wanted to know
Yeah.
what that was, the ultimate goal. Currently you have 13, but in the past you've had more. How is it, if it's the best question, how successful have you been in releasing an individual that was on death row?
So a lot of and I think it's 18, maybe 19 cases. I can't remember off the top of my head right now, but overall that were reversed, that our office has handled. In general, in Tennessee, about 60% of cases have been reversed. Now, it's not all convictions. It's the majority of those is sentencing relief. So it's somebody that shouldn't have gotten death Yeah, and sometimes it happens, but it might be a conviction reversal and a guilty plea happens for a sentence less than
At
life
a
as well.
60% rate.
Yes,
that-
yeah, that's since 1978.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair Lady.
All right, again, I promise no further questions at this time. So thank you for being here, and we are very appreciative of the work that you do just to help us make sure that, as we said, justice is served. So thank you. And now we will ask our friends from Tricor
Thank
to
you.
come forward. Thank you, Justina. Well, good morning. Mr. Hart, it's good to see you and your team again.
Is this
for the-
on? There we go.
We are. So
Good
if
morning,
you would
Madam Chair.
introduce your team, and we will look forward to your presentation as we continue to kind of focus on the criminal justice system.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for allowing us to be here. To my right is Demetria Gibson, and she is their Chief Transition Officer and General Counsel for Tricor. To my left is Pat Thompson, and he is our CFO. In the audience, I have Nikki Turner, who is our Chief People Officer, and Troy Shanks, who is our Chief Customer Officer. So I thought I would start off just with a very quick overview. I know there's a few new members in the committee, and so I'd like to just kind of address that for you. But Tricor is a self-sufficient state agency. We're created by TCA 41-22-401 back in 1994. It's also known as Tricor Inmate Labor Act of 1994. It's governed by a 9-member board of directors representing expertise in multiple business disciplines. The Commissioner of Correction also is a member of our board, but he is an ex officio member, and his vote counts whenever there is a tie between all the other board members. We operate on a business model that includes monthly financial reporting and a 5-year strategic business plan, which also includes a capital replacement plan. We're based in 12 locations, including 10 correctional facilities, 1 outside facility here in Davidson County, and then we are currently in 1 county jail system, which is Shelby County. Some of our programs that we have, as you can see, is we're in agriculture, we have service industries, and manufacturing industries. The programs that we provide is for work skills, non-social or pro-social programming, and cognitive behavior restructuring, which is kind of our foundation of our programs. We provide pre-release transitional services, and that are like life skills, thinking for a change, which is our pro-social cognitive behavior foundation course. We do resumes, home plans, and a variety of other services for the men and women that are in our programs. We also provide post-release services, which include job and housing transitional assistance, vital documents, medical care, transportation, substance abuse networks. Our FY 2022 offenders served, we served 1,459 different individuals throughout last year, and our number of offender program hours for those was 1,150,000 hours. As far as our dashboard, the things that we really pay attention to, our 3-year recidivism rate for FY 2022 was at 11.8%. That happened to be the lowest recidivism rate that we have achieved as an organization in the history. Our revenue was at $28.17 million, and our cost savings to the state, and this is based on 4 or 5 different calculations, but the major calculations are the delta between our recidivism rate and the state's average, as well as the number of offender hours that we are working, which was 1,150,000, and then that is taking by a cost per hour that the Department of Correction gives us each year. So that number was $9.867 million. Tricor's upcoming dashboard for 2023, which is the year we're in, we always shoot for a recidivism rate that is below 20%. Currently, we're tracking year-to-date through December at 14.5%. Our revenue that we have budgeted and targeted for this year is $26.73 million, and our cost savings to the state that we're anticipating based upon these numbers is $11.9 million. And again, Tricor provides all these programs and savings to the state at zero cost to the taxpayers. I did want to bring up our comptroller's audit. We do a fiscal audit with Comptroller's Mumpire's team each year. And last year we had one finding. As noted in our prior audit, we were unable to observe the fiscal year-end inventory of June 30th, 2020 due to COVID pandemic restrictions. We have fully mitigated that. We've figured out ways of doing it if we ever got into that situation again where the comptroller's team could not come out and do a physical audit with us. This last year ending on June 30th of 2022, they were able to conduct the year-end audit, and so we now have a true beginning inventory, and this finding will go away. As far as our Tricor budget for 2024 that we've submitted to the state, we're expecting revenues around $26.1 million. It's down a little bit from last year, but last year had the second half of the license plate reissue revenue in it. So that's the main reason for the drop. Our capital budget that we expect to spend during upcoming fiscal year is $948,000. That'll be capital items such as agriculture or manufacturing equipment that needs to be replaced or additional machines that need to be purchased that are generating revenue for us. Director Thurman had contacted me a little earlier before the budgeting session and would like to have had us look at our vacant positions that we have on the books. We were able to establish that 26 of those positions we were able to vacate or to eliminate because they'd been held open for over 4 or 5 years. I'm not sure exactly what the cost savings to the state would be on that, but I'm sure it's probably around $1.1 million, sorry. And then Tricor is not requesting any state funding for 2024. All of our expenses and capital reinvestment is covered by our revenue generation from the sale of our products and the services that we provide, not only for the state, but for private partners and individuals. So with that, I told you it would be short and sweet, and I am ready to take any questions that you may have for us.
Thank you, Director Hart, for your good work saving the state money and having a budget that doesn't request any funding from the state. We do have some questions on our list, and I'll start with Chairman Kiesling.
Thank you, Chairman. We do, Mr. Hart, we do have, I've got a couple of 3 questions here. Back in 2019, let's go to the farm. Let's head down to the farm to Bledsoe County, and you did shift from the dairy over to a beef operation. Currently, what is our herd count or number of head in the herd at this moment?
We are maintaining right at 200 mature animals, our breeding animals, and then we're running through the operation 400 to 600 additional animals. Part of those are the offspring from the breeding animals, and then we're also buying, adding weight, backgrounding these other cattle, and then reselling them, making full loads of cattle, that buyers are buying.
So at what poundage or what weight, we'll rephrase that, what weight are the calves that are at sale time then? And I assume that's nearer in the fall of the year, is that correct?
We shoot for 2 different sales. We try to do a fall of the year and then kind of a April, May time to try to hit both markets. But we're trying to shoot from a 550 to a 650 pound weight.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Great. Are the cost, the question here is, are the costs per pound of beef, have they been remaining constant for the past few months, 12, 24 months?
They've been relatively stable. We have sold beef in the $1.50 to $1.90 range. And I say it's fairly stable because in the livestock market, if you've got swings of 40 or 50 cents over a period of time, that's not a huge issue. But you know, when you look at it from a trend across several years, it's been staying in that $1.50, $1.75.
Gotcha.
You know, for what we're selling.
Final. Can Tricor provide, can you get into some details regarding the row crops that in addition to the cattle operation, your production annually and the sale price and overall revenue then that you're generating, please?
Okay. Yeah, our row crop operation is in West Tennessee at the farm over there. And we farm roughly 2,600 acres each year, and it's made up of corn, soybeans, and wheat. The wheat and soybean acreage are double cropped. So we have about 350 acres of wheat that we put out each year. Over the last 2 or 3 years, the average yield has been 60 to 65 bushel the acre. And the price of wheat, especially in the last year, really jumped. Typically, it's in the $5 a bushel range, but last year we were selling wheat in close to $8 in some instances.
And is that local cooperative, sir? Is that your market?
Yes, sir. We sell to 2 main granaries in the
Yeah.
local market, and one of them is Cargill, and the other one is
Yeah.
just another local granary. But and then on soybeans, our yields over the last few years have averaged around 45 bushel to the acre. The price has ranged from $11 to $14, $15 a bushel, depending upon the year. And then our corn has averaged in the neighborhood of 150 to 175. Last year was a down year for us because we had a 5-week drought right at the pollination time on the corn, and it reduced our yields basically in half. But the corn prices, though, have remained very, very strong, and we've had some sales close to $7 or a little over per bushel in the last couple years. So
Speaking of drought, final question, final wrap up here. Have you considered irrigation or potential to an extent? I'll put it.
we have, and it costs about $150 an acre right now for irrigation. But we have looked at it, and we're interested in it. But to be able to irrigate enough acres, you know, it'd be a huge investment on our part. It's something that I think eventually we will put at least a small irrigation system in and test it and see what kind of results that we get from it if it truly pays for itself. But we're not quite ready to make that investment yet.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hart. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And thank you, Chairman Keesling. Next on the list is Chairman Hawk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director Hart, thank you and your team for being here. Let's go back to slide 6, where you're discussing your capital budget, the $948,000.
Mm-hmm.
Give us a broader idea. What are our investments in this arena there, please?
Yes, sir. I'm going to turn it over to Pat Thompson, our CFO, and let him give you some of the major pieces.
Hello, my name is Pat Thompson. I'm CFO for Tricor. Thank you for the question. Some of the primary items that are included in $948,000 capital budget for next year. We have $150,000 set aside for an air seeder replacement. As Mr. Hart was just discussing, we are investigating irrigation, so we have some money allocated for a $120,000 irrigation pivot system. We have $100,000 set aside for a draper head, trade-in value to be taken into account whenever we replace that item. And we've been looking at some security fencing for the home office there at the Wyland Center. As you may recall, the license plate tag plant was moved on site to our campus when our warehouse was destroyed back during the tornado. So it's required some additional capital around the immediate campus to protect that investment. And those are the big items over $100,000. We also have some money set aside for replacement of textile equipment where we're doing sewing and things like that.
Chairman Hawk?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for spelling that out very well for us. I appreciate that. In your beginning comments, you mentioned where you operate, and you mentioned Shelby County. I think we started last year's budget hearing. You talked about recycling programs that you were working at Shelby County, looking to add that to some other counties, Henderson County potentially, and other opportunities there. Can you expound upon those programs, and are we looking to go into any more communities?
Thank you for that question. At Shelby County, we still have the recycling program, and we're also looking now at a call center for female offenders, because they have both on site, and we're looking at that. We're in talks with several other counties right now, either on buying a lot of our products or establishing a program. A lot of the county systems don't really have industry space, so we have to be very selective with it, but there's a couple counties that do, and we're currently in talks with them and with potential partners about putting programs there. Our real focus is to continue to do that, because we feel like that's where we can make a large impact and help in the county and city jail systems, especially with recidivism. With Henderson County, I'd like to talk about that briefly, because we started the program. We taught them the things that we were doing that we thought were being successful. We trained their people, and in this past year, they've been able to take over that program on their own and continue on with it. So we're still there for Henderson County if they need us. But now then, we've moved on and we're looking at some other counties. So. But it's very important to us to continue to do work with all the counties in Tennessee.
Thank you, Chairman Hawk. Next on the list, Chairman Crawford.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Earlier, you were talking about the cattle program you had going and the row crops and those type of things. And I know you all have a great partnership with several things within your area, but can you tell me if y'all have added anything? I see here on your presentation, you got call centers, recycling and stuff. What have you added in the last year or so?
The main thing that we've added is additional partners in some of the existing sites that we're at. We've added, I know for sure, 2 new call center partners. We've also added or expanded, I should say, one of our pie partners operations at Turney Center. And then one of the things that is coming up is that one of our pie partners is actually leaving. They had trouble finding, I'm going to say, labor for their private plant, and they finally give up on that, and they're moving their operation back into Mexico. But with that happening, there was a couple lines of products that company was making for another company over in North Carolina, and we're in talks with them about continuing to make those particular products and take that North Carolina company on as a partner. The other thing that we've been doing is kind of moving some of our operations around to reduce some of the risk of having a shutdown and then we have no ability to manufacture or produce something. So we're kind of in that mode, as well as we're out here talking with new potential partners. So
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady.
Thank you, Chairman Faison.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Committee, you'll be interested to know this. Maybe 7 years ago, I chaired the Government Operations Committee, and the audit for Tricor was absolutely terrible. It was in such a position that basically Government Ops vacated the board and reconstituted the board. That man sitting in the middle was part of the group that took over. And since that time, they have knocked it out of the park, blown their audits away, done an outstanding job. And it forced me to dig down deep in what Tricor does. And we've kind of not really hit it today, but I just want to brag on them for a minute. They're doing life-changing stuff that impact you in the long run. There are people in prison that Tricor is invested in, and they help rebuild humans. And I just want to pause for a minute and say, from what y'all came to when I saw that audit 7 years ago, and I don't think any of y'all were even there then, you came in after that, to where you are now, it's just amazing. And what you do is a huge benefit for all of Tennesseans. And I will say this, not only did you not ask for money, which I think is cool, but you save Tennesseans money. Because when the people come out of prison that you have been a part of and that you've helped, it's a big difference. And they're become a positive member of society, which in turn saves Tennessee money. So I just want to brag on y'all, tell you thank you. Excellent job. Keep it up.
We appreciate the comments, but unfortunately, I was there during that time. I sat in front of committees for 2.5 hours getting our rear ends handed to us, which, yeah, we deserved it. So.
Representative McKenzie, would you like to help Chairman Faison out here?
I do appreciate my pastor from Cobb County over there. He's preaching, but I appreciate your honesty in that regard. But I really like to echo what Chairman had spoke to. You know, I can't imagine what it's like to be behind bars and locked up and have your day defined in a fairly small space, but to allow them to have that ability to contribute, it does way beyond giving us money back and being a zero something and all that. It helps. I think it helps our guards. It helps our caseworkers, social work. It just flat out helps our offenders while they're paying their debt to society. So I really, really thank you for that. And, and I was going to touch on what you had spoke on earlier. The representative from Greene County had spoke to, and that was, the textile piece. I had the opportunity to tour the facility there and in the eastern part of the state. And it's great operation. I was disappointed that, unfortunately, I'm going to restate it because our workforce it's not being compensated at a good rate. That outfit did not have the opportunity to continue on producing for Tricor there at Morgan County. So, but it's good. I think you're trying to find other partners. Hopefully you will find other partners because that operation, one, is giving a valuable product. They're just not spending their sewing machines for nothing. They're producing valuable pieces of equipment for the medical industry, and just the excitement of those offenders, those citizens faces. And as we keep saying, 90-something% of them are going to be our neighbors. So letting them come out with feeling good about what they've done while they were serving their time is just outstanding. So thank you for cleaning up your financials and your audits, but also producing such a valuable resource. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. These two gentlemen from East Tennessee have summed it up so well. I'll just say amen. They've done such an awesome job. Where's your biggest farming operation in West Tennessee? I want to ask you.
It's in West Tennessee. They're at Henning.
At Hennings, at the Fort Pillow, we call
Fort
it.
Pillow. Yes.
Okay, good. And one other quick thing, because I've talked to you guys over the last day or so about looking at a program in my area. Can you just kind of briefly talk about how we would go through that for the purpose of the committee in case somebody else won't do the same thing?
Yes, sir. I'm going to have Chief Transition Officer Gibson talk to you about that.
Good morning. Am I on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Try it again.
Maybe. No.
Can't hear you yet.
I know.
There, we heard you and we lost you. Yeah, we got you. There we go.
Sorry.
Technically challenged.
I am just a bit. Good morning, Demetria Gibson, Chief Transition Officer with Tricor. So one of the easiest ways to start working with us is honestly to reach out. We travel the entire state. We'll come and look at any spaces that you have available in your areas. We'll talk to potential employers that are in your areas. And the biggest thing that we always like to say is we try to meet everyone exactly where they are. So you have different areas that might have spaces that are large spaces where you can bring an industry into that space, but everybody doesn't have that. So you might have employers that are looking for individuals that are able to come out and work with them in the community. We're able to help set up those programs as well. So the easiest thing is to reach out to myself or to our Chief Customer Officer, who's also with us today, and we will come meet you and again meet you where you are and see what best fits your particular area and the needs of your community.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Freeman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm going to echo what many of my colleagues have said, and thank you for what you do. I've toured several of your facilities, and you really are giving people an opportunity to make a better life for themselves. But along that line of thought, do you track recidivism rates along trades to see if there are certain trades that are maybe not allowing the participants to get a job afterwards? And then secondly, thank you for answering the question of how to reach out and engage to get someone to come in. But are you guys intentional in selecting trades and partners that you know will give an opportunity for those once they get out to get a meaningful, well-paying job?
I will answer your second question, then I'll turn it back over to CTO Gibson to answer your first question. But as far as the second and being intentional, yes. We look at the Department of Labor's 10-year outlook as one of our key looks to determine which industries or which jobs are going to be in need, over the next 10 years. A few years ago, for an example, we were looking at it, and construction was a big thing there. And so we put in a building trades or vocational program in Memphis at Mark Luttrell. And so we're training men down there on different construction skills, from roofing to framing, electrical, plumbing, those different things. And they're getting a certification for those that whenever they do get released, they can go to a construction firm or whatever, show them the certificates that they got, and it should give them an opportunity, to get a job with them. And then some of the other things that we have seen, it all comes from basically that 10-year outlook. The other thing that we look for whenever we're trying to partner with a private firm or whatever is, are they a good fit culturally with us? Because we are so focused on our mission, which is preparing offenders for success after release. We want partners that, one, believe in second chances, two, believe in hiring these men and women whenever they do get out, and three, providing a job skill set that is transferable. So we have print operations, for example, or even textiles, and there's not a whole lot of jobs anymore in print or textiles, but they're learning processes, they're learning work ethic, they're learning a lot of other things that will help and transfer into other industries or other types of jobs. So, but with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Gibson, and she can talk about the recidivism rates.
Sure. So CEO Hart mentioned that our mission is to prepare offenders for success after release. The other part of what we do is trying to achieve our vision, which is after successfully completing the TRICOR program, no participant will return to prison. For us, that means a 0% recidivism rate. We don't want anyone to go back. And so to that end, we are vigilant in terms of how we track our data for absolutely everything. We can scale it down to the interactions they had with our team members, the programming that they were in, the amount of savings that they had in their account when they were released, the length of time that they were with us. We track across a very segmented, a lot of segments to make sure that we are targeting the programming that our folks need. One of the hallmarks of what we do is Thinking for a Change is a cognitive behavioral training program. We found that folks that went through that program with us, taught with fidelity, they get out and they do not come back. One of the other things that we learned is that if we are able to give our folks a forklift certification, only 4% of folks that get that certification come back, meaning, hey, let's get that certification into the hands of our folks. And so that's how we decide and tailor our programming, all tied back to us trying to achieve that vision and giving them the resources and the support and the certifications while they're with us so that when they get out, they stay out. And so we track all of that data.
Right. Representative Lynn.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. That is so fascinating to me. I talk with a lot of recruiting managers in my area. We have a lot of distribution centers and all of that. And one thing that they have that's so frustrating is that if someone has a criminal record, they often will not keep that employee. So the employee might start, they do a background check, and then they let them go. Very frustrating. But the state of Tennessee has a program where they will bond people. And so I let them know you can keep this person with the help of the state of Tennessee. I don't know if you all scream that from the rooftops, but I try to tell people I don't feel like I hit enough people. But anyway, we can share that so that people can work and have a good paying job like that. A forklift driver, they're so needed in my district. I know that, and they pay very well. And that's very exciting. So thank you for sharing that. And I just thought I'd share about the state of Tennessee bonding someone with a criminal history so that they can work and there's no risk to the employer if they're willing to join that program. So thank you.
Thank you for that.
I don't see any other hands. I would just add to what Chairman Faison was alluding to earlier. I think you guys, obviously your organization does save the state money in a number of ways, but I think the more important thing that you do is, as he mentioned, is actually change lives. And the recidivism rate is, that is huge because we just, our prisons are too often a revolving door, and that's costly for the taxpayer, and it's costly on the human lives that are impacted. So thank you for the work that you're doing, and we look forward to hearing about more expansions with the additional capital projects and hopefully more partnerships with both local governments and business partners as well next year at this time. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on our presentation list for this morning, the Department of Veteran Services will ask Major General Baker and his team to come forward. I do not know. We'll give you guys a minute to work through the technology down there. Hmm. I can't look at themselves, that's why they can't load it.
See if it's in a group. Okay.
There. They gotta be able to see it.
Yeah, the HD. Right there.
Let's try that. So it's clicker.
Here. I don't think there is. There ain't a USB. You might just have to do this, if that works. Where's the, let's see.
Members, I don't believe that we got a presentation slides ahead of time, so you will not find those on your dashboard. So if the general is able to get that loaded, we'll have to pay close attention to the screen.
Is that on? Okay.
All right, members, we have just a couple minutes here. We're trying to get the dashboard loaded so you can follow along with the presentation. So just be patient for a couple minutes.
We need a good butcher board over there, and then we could just keep on rolling. We wouldn't have to worry about a computer.
Members, it's going to take a couple of minutes to load, but we're going to ask if General Baker, I think he can see his slides. So if we could just ask the young lady to perhaps go behind the table. Thank you. We will ask you, General, if you could just proceed with your presentation. I'm assuming that you can see what you need to work from. We will catch up. Those will be loaded on dashboard just shortly. But if you, in the interest of time, please just begin your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Hazelwood, Vice Chair Baum, and members of the House Finance, Ways, and Means Committees for having us here today. Sorry about the technical difficulties. Digital world, obviously, we've got some learning to do on that. But part of my leadership team is here at the table with me today. I want to go ahead and let them announce who they are.
Mike Scholes, the Deputy Commissioner.
Chrissy Yamasa, the Budget Director.
Travis Murphy, Assistant Commissioner for Appeals and Accreditation.
Patrick Rice, Assistant Commissioner for Cemetery Operations.
Also on the front row, I've got my State Operations Director, Tony McConnell, my Legislative Liaison, Evan Ward, my HR, Dolores Keene, and an intern from Cookville, Alley, Jane Gilbert.
Welcome all.
Thank you, ma'am. We're excited to be here today to present the Department of Veteran Services FY24 budget request to you. Before we start, I just want to say thanks to all the members of this committee who at some point in your life decided to wear the cloth of our nation and serve, or if you had family members that are serving or have served. Thank you so much. In the short time since the last budget was released and the new fiscal year started, our strategic environment has experienced some impactful changes. The most notable of these is the promise to address comprehensive toxics, or the PACT Act, which was signed into law last August. Veterans nationwide have since set an all-time record, filing over 200,000 claims, an increase of 21% over the same period in previous year. Over 6,300 of those PACT Act claims were filed here in the volunteer state. The PACT Act makes over 20 conditions now presumptive due to toxic exposures and may affect over 5 million veterans nationally. Over 100,000 in Tennessee may be affected by this. It is touted as potentially the largest expansion of VA healthcare in history. Throughout this budget request, this legislation will be the backdrop as we continue to focus on strengthening our core capabilities, as well as continuing to provide outstanding service to our veterans and their families. The second slide we have, and I don't think you have it up yet still, talks about some highlights our department would like to share with you of the past year. We generally believe our mission is the noblest in state government, and we are honored to be able to serve those who have served us all. At TDVS, we strive to be the best with a constant focus on delivering quality services and on how we can improve those services. For example, 52 of our cemetery staff conducted 3,097 burials in FY '22.
Members, that's information. You can now access the slides on dashboard.
The Parker's Crossroads Cemetery received the Operational Excellence Award by passing the National Cemetery Administration with an overall 97% rating. That's an inspection that only 10% of cemeteries nationally are currently passing. Additionally, our 20 veteran service officers met with and served 11,549 veterans. We also estimate that veterans were compensated approximately $75 million through their VA claims that were submitted by our frontline veteran service officers this past year. Our appeals team assisted veterans in receiving retroactive payments totaling $14,400,000 last year. In addition, this team leads the nation with an astounding 92% positive outcome rate on appeals when we provide oral advocacy. We highlight the dollars veterans receive by working with us to demonstrate the economic impact. But as you know, compensation is not the only benefit they receive by working with us. Oftentimes, they are awarded VA benefits and health care for life. They also gain access to other social services and mental health options through the VA, regardless of their disability rating. We believe the more veterans we serve, the more Tennessee's economy will flourish and the more positive impacts that will be made upon their lives in many areas. The next slide I want to talk about is our current and operational environment. Starting at the top left of this slide, we illustrate the data that supports this year's request for 4 additional cemetery staff. Our cemetery staffing request is based on the National Cemetery Administration model. We currently have 51 of our 52 cemetery positions filled, and this year's request moves us closer to the model, but still leaves us at a total deficit of 12. 3 of our 5 cemeteries will be inspected by the National Cemetery Administration this next year. And our goal is to be awarded the Operational Excellence Award at each one of those, just as we did at Parker's Crossroads. The graph on the top far right depicts our current burial volume trend line, and the national forecast, as you can see, predicts steady growth through 2035. Our cemetery in West Tennessee in Memphis is currently the 3rd highest burial volume in the nation. We anticipate that to continue. Most of our Vietnam veterans, our 2nd largest group, are now approaching 80 years of age. Our promise to honor our veterans and their families by providing a final pristine resting place is a promise we intend to keep. Working from left to right on the bottom of this slide, we demonstrate the increased workload and some of the retroactive awards we have garnered for veterans and their family this past year. The graph at the bottom left depicts the growth at TDVS field offices and the number of packages we've processed by month compared to last year. We believe the increase shown is influenced by our increased outreach efforts and early indicators of the PACT Act. The graph on the far right conveys the amount of retroactive funds put directly in veterans' pockets by our appeals divisions, resulting in over $14 million this past year. The 4th slide in your binder lists individual items for each increase by category. You will see that these increases support and are consistent with our department's core functions and our 4-year strategic plan priorities. They are enhancing customer service, communication and outreach, human capital investment, and enhanced veteran outcomes. All 3 of these represent critical elements of TDVS operations. Our first increase request will strengthen our capability to meet the core statutory requirements found in Tennessee Code. The second critical request strengthens our department capacity in essential HR, budget, procurement, and facilities management functions. It also enhances and leverages our strategic outreach and our partnership efforts. Our last request seeks to raise overall awareness of the benefits available to veterans, active duty military, and their families through reimagined marketing, branding, technology, and focused messaging. These requests total $2,602,900 recurring dollars, $2,092,000 non-recurring dollars. In total, $4,694,900 in cost increases to include 12 full-time employees. Finally, our total budget request for 23-24 to include our baseline and our cost increases is $15,224,500. Chairwoman Hazelwood, that concludes our formal presentation, but we will be glad to answer any questions you or the committee might have of us.
Thank you, General Baker. And you all obviously have a wide range of services that you provide to both some active duty and obviously to veterans in our state. And we're grateful for that, as we know the veterans are, and we're indeed most grateful to the veterans for their service. We do have some questions, and I'm going to just start off with asking you for an update, something near and dear to my heart, something that in my neck of the woods took quite some time to get underway, but there was a groundbreaking and there's construction. And so the Bradley County Veterans Home, can you just kind of give us a status report on where we are with that, what the capacity will be, if we have a wait list, and just any information that you care to share about that facility?
So, in fact, we had one of our veteran home boards meeting down there in November, just to look at the facility in its final stages of construction and just get a feel for what it looks like. It's a beautiful facility. It's based on a kind of a mountain chalet model, and it sits right back in a hill there. I know the community is very proud of it, and we're excited about it. There've been some delays in the final punch list, if you will. That project kicked off right prior to the pandemic. They went through a couple of different superintendents, and they've had some issues on the back end with getting some things in their doors. Some of the flooring, not quite what it needs to be in some of the residents. They have hired five employees though, so they're starting to minimally staff it. We think we'll be ready to start looking at a ribbon cut in either late spring or early summer. And then they'll get their accreditation team in there. I think they start out with like 8 patients. And then after the Department of Health and the VA comes in and certifies them, then they'll ramp that up as the year continues. But we're hoping to cut a ribbon late this spring or early summer at Cleveland. Very proud to be part of that too.
And it's a much needed facility. I know there's a lot of support locally and even regionally for that. And I know people are going to be excited. Can you speak to capacity and wait list, or are we at that point yet?
I believe that's a 108 bed facility there in Cleveland. So that will be our 5th when that's completed. We'll have 4 others in the state. Wait list, not for sure on that one yet. I would probably need to talk to the executive director about that.
All right, thank you. And then I believe there's Shelby County, or Arlington, Shelby County. Can you give us a progress report on that?
Yes, ma'am. So back in June, we did a groundbreaking in Arlington there for the West Tennessee Veterans Home, another project that was a very strong local effort from a lot of folks down there that gave of their time and resources to make that happen. And right now, construction's going well, really making a lot of progress. We've had a few delays recently due to rain because they're still pouring some concrete. But we're thinking at least the plan calls for May of 24 to be construction complete on that facility.
So hopefully with no pandemics, much quicker construction than the Bradley County facility. Next on the list, Chairman Williams.
Thank you, General. Thank you all for coming. I'm just going to ask you probably a no-brainer for me, but obviously the Upper Cumberland Veterans Cemetery purchased property several years ago. Senator Bailey, Speaker Sexton, and I, and the whole Upper Cumberland delegation really excited about the process.
the possibilities of that. I guess your staff had communicated with most of us about where we fell in the rankings as it relates to getting funded, the federal side of the funding for that. I guess the question for me is really, what can we do as legislators to help you better present or propose or find more favor with the federal bureaucracy that is going on as it relates to those funds?
Well, thanks again. And again, that's another strong local effort there that made that happen. And we're excited about it. Our application is in good standing. The state matches there. It's just hard to compete at this time at the federal level because they got a $50 million budget. They had 106 projects sent in from the 121 different cemeteries around the nation this past year. And we make the cut because of just the competitiveness that we find ourselves with the number of new veterans we're serving. We're at a disadvantage there that they're counting the Chattanooga National Cemetery 75 miles north from there, 75 miles south from the National Cemetery in Kentucky, there around Nancy, Kentucky. And then you take John Sevier in East Tennessee and McCrory Lane here in Davidson County, and the circles don't show a lot of new areas served or new veteran population served. So to your point, I think the best thing we can do is to really push our CODEL from every angle we can to see if they can influence that. It's a small pot of money and there's a lot of need out there, and it's a priority too. To start with, because expansions are their first priority because they don't want a cemetery to become inoperable because they cannot bury. So expansions are always the first priority. Everything's ready. We just need to somehow find a way through the federal CODEL to maybe nudge that over the edge and get us, on that match list.
Thank you. I appreciate that. For those that don't know, I think CODEL is a congressional delegation. Is that correct?
Correct. And obviously our two U.S. senators as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I wanted to follow up. Your staff has also helped with a issue regarding retirement and folks that are leaving, those veterans that are leaving. And I had an instance where benefits are having a hard time getting paid. Can you communicate with me? Is there anything we can do to speed up the process of helping get benefits paid to those individuals that have acquired it?
Well, I want to make sure I understand. You're asking about retirement benefits or disability benefits?
Retirement benefits.
Okay. Well, I'm not an expert on HRC, Human Resources Command. I did go through the process individually, though, about 18 months ago. So it is a little bit of a delay with that because everything has a choke point. And sometimes all of those paperwork has to get to the right people in Human Resources Command for the Army, that being Fort Knox, Kentucky. Right. So sometimes it's just a lot of folks in line at the same time. And the pandemic affected that too, because a lot of those federal workers were either working from home or they wasn't working for a while. So they got even further behind during a 12 or 18 month period there.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. And like you said in your presentation, and like many of the members up here, we're very appreciative to our veterans and their service to our community and our state, our nation. And so thank you for the great work that you do.
Thank you.
Chairman Zachary, I believe you have a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. General, thank you to you and your team. It's been said numerous times, but I don't think it can be overstated. Thank you for how you serve and support our veterans across the state, and thank you for your team. Last year, we appropriated $20 million for the Wings of Liberty Museum, and then $500,000 for the French Broad Veterans Memorial Park. Can you just give us an update on that? Has construction begun on those, and do you have a completion date on those?
So I don't have any recent information on the park. I know what you're talking about there on the French Broad. Beautiful. It's going to be a beautiful park. We're very excited about that. And it's right across from our cemetery there too. So we're excited about that. On the Tennessee Wings of Liberty Museum, right now they're looking at doing a groundbreaking sometime this summer. And trying to have the operational museum completed within the next year, 18 months. The entire project, which is multi-phased, I think is looking at more 3 or 4 years, but the museum piece and the operational piece of that, they're going to try to break ground on that this summer. Is what the latest I've seen on that.
Thank you, General. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Chairman Baum.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, General Baker, for your service and for working on behalf of our veterans. In your budget is $2.2 million for strengthening core capabilities. 66,000 of this is itemized for the Department of Corrections. Could you give us a few more details on that line item?
So I'll try to answer that, and then may let my budget director jump in deep dive on that for you. But we have an agreement with the Department of Corrections. They provide inmates for us to do lawn maintenance at our cemeteries, especially in West Tennessee at Memphis and here on McCory Lane. A great opportunity. I know the group before us was talking about. In fact, we get folks out of Marcus Luttrell Correctional Facility that comes out and works with us. We've actually hired them in the past because, you know, as they re-enter society, they were great help, and they wanted to come to work for us. So that's an opportunity for them. It helps us tremendously because, you know, you're talking in some cases 7,500 acres that has to be pristinely maintained, limbs, leaves, all the weed eating, all that stuff that has to go on while burials, headstones being set, all those other functions have to happen as well. So that is where that price tag is. It has went up. Like everything else, the pandemic has got that inflation rate out there now. So that's part of the reason that's increased some. You got anything to that, Chrissy?
Just the salary, yeah. Just the salary part went up as well. So that's the cost in that.
Okay, thank you for that information. And we have a question about one more item in the budget. There's $900,000 allocated for county outreach and relations. 600,000 of this is for market activation. Could you tell us a little bit more about what that item is?
So what we're looking at there is, I talked about in that third tranche, rebranding, reimaging, marketing. What is our brand? As you know, the department changed its name a few years ago from Veterans Affairs, which a lot of the states call themselves, to Veteran Services. We wanted to separate ourselves from being kind of lumped in with the VA. Even though we work with them hand in hand, we want to make sure people understand we're a state agency and we're here for the citizens of Tennessee. So we want to increase that brand. We feel like, and I'm sure a lot of agencies come before you and say, we're the best kept secret in state government. And I feel that way. I think anecdotally, I've been pounded for 2 years in this job by people are surprised when I tell them what we do and some of the benefits that we can, advocate for them on their behalf for. They just look at me with a blank stare, like they didn't know that existed. And it's not only us, it's our county service officer partners as well. We're trying to get that message out. And part of that is going back and looking at, okay, what have we done in the past? Print media, brochures, all of that. We spent about $50,000 this past September on some ads that we bought through a radio network. And what we've seen happen just from those 8 weeks of ads, 30-second clips, was a call increase at our inquiry line that had been running about 500 a month. Now it's running about 1,000. So we know our message is not getting out properly, and the PACT Act is helping some of that because there's a lot of free commercials on TV about how to, file a claim and all that on there. But we want to make sure we take that to the next step. We envision at some point a marketing strategy coming out of that money, and also a completely redesigned website that's on the outside of the firewall that STS currently has, so that veterans out there who are technologically advanced and want to use that can get on there and interact. They can see not only what we offer, but maybe what is offered by other state agencies that they could benefit from. So, unfortunately, technology in this day and age is expensive, but we want to be on the cutting edge of that, and we want to make sure that people understand our message and know what we're talking about.
Okay, thank you for those details.
Right, General, I don't believe that we have any further questions, but I think Veteran Services aptly describes what you all do, and we appreciate the work that's done every day. No, I have a person in my county that works directly with veterans on a daily basis, and it's a 24/7 kind of situation. They call, he answers, and he's been immeasurably helpful to veterans in Hamilton County who have had issues. Lots of times it's not a denial of it, it's just simply not knowing how to navigate the system. I think that's the biggest problem, and a simplified website, all of those things are going to help. But for those people who are on the older end of the spectrum, there's always going to need to be, that personal touch is going to be required. And for younger too, because sometimes technology doesn't always get you there. So again, we're very thankful for the services that you provide to Tennessee veterans and to those veterans who have made the wise decision to locate in Tennessee for their retirement, whether or not they came from here. So thank you.
Thank you.
Members, that concludes our budget presentations for today, but we do have a special presentation from the Tennessee Wildlife Resource Agency. As those of you who were here last session will recall, last General Assembly, we had a retiring member, Curtis Halford, who had headed up the Department of Agricultural Committee for a number of years. And in his honor, we named a lake in West Tennessee near his home, Halford Lake. And we have asked TWRA, it was a part of statute, for them to report to this committee on the progress and the oversight administration of that lake. So we have those folks here with us today. And I'm going to have chairman's prerogative and tell Mike Bell that he needs to go home. Someone who had a couple of stents 2 days ago does not need to be sitting in that chair. In my medical degree, I didn't sleep in a Holiday Inn last night. I do live with a doctor, but even I know that is a dumb move. So you should not be here. But since you are.
Madam Chair.
We do, we're glad to see you in light of what you have been through, and glad that you are still, as a friend of mine used to say, on the right side of the grass. So welcome, and we'll let you present, and then we're going to call an Uber and send you home.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the expression of concern. My doctor did release me to come back to work, even though, I'm still a little tired, but I am here. Appreciate the concern I've heard from many of my former colleagues down here. It is greatly appreciated, the love that's been shown. So thank you. But I am Mike Bell, the Legislative Director for the Tennessee Wildlife Resource Agency, and we are here today to present a budget update on Lake Halford per the legislation that was passed last year that requires us to appear before the House and Senate Finance Committees by February 1st. And to my immediate right, I have Mr. Frank Fiss, who is the Deputy Director of Business Operations. And then to his right is our Executive Director, Mr. Jason Maxedon. To my left, I have our Deputy Director of Field Operations, Brandon Ware. And then beside him is somebody I know most of y'all, if not all of you, are very familiar with, Mr. Tory Grimes, who's our new General Counsel. So we brought the whole team this morning to make our presentation to you. And at this moment, I will turn it over to our Director, Mr. Jason Maxedon.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm on there. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'll go ahead and present the budget overview to you, and you have a handout that's in front of you. I'm going to kind of go over a timeline before we do the budget presentation, just to kind of tell you where TWRA is with Lake Halford. So in April of 2022, Lake Halford was renamed and jurisdiction was transferred from the Carroll County Watershed Authority to TWRA. And then May of 2022, we held a public meeting in Huntington. We wanted to hear from the public of what they wanted for Lake Halford in that area and what they wanted to be able to keep in place, or what they may want the agency to change as we took over ownership of that. And then in July, TWRA began the on-site management of Lake Halford. This is where we brought personnel in to start basically doing the grounds maintenance and the management of the lake there. December of 2022, the Tennessee Fish and Wildlife Commission proclaimed Lake Halford as a state fishing area, and that was Proclamation 2212. And then we proclaimed the fishing regulations. The commission also passed rules and regulations governing Lake Halford and amended the rules and regulations governing license and permits fees. And that's where we are right now. That's with the AG's office. We're waiting any day to hear information back from them. So we're anticipating final approval of those rules. And what that would do is charge a lake user fee of $6 per day or $48 per year if they bought an annual permit. That's a difference from what the Watershed Authority was charging. They were charging $5 a day for non-county users, $3 a day for the county users, and $30 annually for that. So basically, we done what we heard from the public as far as the management. We pretty much kept everything in place there. Another thing that we kept in place was the $5,000 that they were charging adjacent landowners for their dock fees. So if you look at the bottom, and basically no revenues have been collected by us at this time because we're waiting on those rules to go into effect before we can collect any fees. But the FY23 budget, it's right at $1 million. You can see what those are being spent on at the bottom. Kind of just hit some of the higher dollar amounts. You see the maintenance and repairs. We had to put up security cameras and electronic gates. That facility's open 30 minutes before sunrise until sunset, and we wanted an automatic gate that would do that. Equipment is where we bought things like tractors, mowers, side-by-sides, things to be able to do the annual operations and maintenance facility. And then buildings. This was a facility that we wanted to build to be able to house our equipment. And then non-building construction are going to be things where we're doing additions to the lake, like fishing piers and docks to be able to provide the public more opportunity to fish there. I'll pause there and answer any questions, what we think that it will take to manage that going forward. If you'll look over to the right before I pause, the FY24, we think it'll take about $300,000 annually to be able to operate that after we get these initial costs incurred.
Thank you. Very clear presentation, and I know that, once the rules are in place, then these fees will begin getting charged. And how do you monitor that?
So they can buy that electronically, or they can go on our license agent, and we'll be able to monitor it that way whenever they purchase that. We'll know who else purchasing a permit that way.
For the day or for the annually?
Yes, ma'am.
Chairman Hawk, you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wonder if anyone has approached the namesake to be the gatekeeper of this facility, that he can check the licenses as they come in. And Chairman Halford's a dear friend of all of ours, and we're so happy that this was able to occur for him. But is he going to be on site as like a living statue there? Thank you, Madam Chair.
He did offer to be here today if required. And so I think he's willing and able to take on any role that's reasonable to help this facility move forward. Any other questions? Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I kind of remember some of this back from the Ag Committee. So I guess what I'm hearing is basically the changes that have been made and the progress is basically the public opinion of what they wanted to do with the lake in that area. Would that be a fair statement?
Yes, sir. We tried to keep everything in place that was currently going on there, and that's what the public had asked for.
Well, I too remember Chairman Halford, and I know he's a great guy, so I'm just excited that things are going well on his behalf. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And do please let us all know when the unveiling of the new signage and everything to honor now former Chairman Halford. But obviously that is not an honor that he asked for and didn't know it was coming. The rest of us hoisted that honor upon him. Still, I think one of my favorite moments on the floor, and for most of us, when that was named after him. I will mention that I've spoken to some of the local folks down there, and the purchase of this lake by the state caused a significant reduction, in my understanding, wheel tax fees for the citizens of Carroll County. That's a big deal. And so that $11.1 million, I believe it was a significant investment of Tennessee taxpayer funds. We appreciate you all managing this and making sure that all of those folks there can now utilize that without additional tax increases, which is what was coming their direction. And so just as a reminder of why we did this, while we're sitting here talking about this. I know there were some, at least questions from some of the local mayors as to why the state stepped in and saved them from what was rapidly becoming a financial boondoggle for them. And I hate that, but that's what we're here for, is to try to share responsibility with our local partners. So thank you all for taking this on, but did want to let the committee know that at least from one of the local folks I spoke with, it caused a reduction in wheel tax charges for the citizens there. Thank you.
I have no further questions. We thank you for the presentation. We look forward, as Leader Lambert said, to the unveiling and all of the formal hoopla that will surround that. And Mr. Bell, please, we are delighted that your health
Thank you.
is on the upswing, but we do encourage you to take care of yourself, and perhaps limit activities would be an appropriate term. And we are willing to get an Uber to get you not all the way to Cleveland, but to get you to your local residence.
Madam Chair, Madam Chair, may I make a recommendation? Not only would ask the committee, we could sure come up with the funds to pay for that Uber. I'm sure we could also station a state trooper outside his residence where he does not leave during
keep him-
his
keep him there,
recovery as
yes.
well. So
House arrest.
that's right. That's right.
All right. Any other comments for the good of the body? Thank you, folks from TWRA. That does complete our business for today. You'll be getting a calendar shortly with the remainder of the budget hearings scheduled. I will warn you, we will need to be here early on Monday, the 30th. So to begin or to restart our work. So look forward to seeing you then. In the meantime, have a nice week off, and you can take all this information home with you and study it and be prepared for the test on the 30th and be prepared for the upcoming meetings. Thank you all for your attention, and we are adjourned.